Hey friends, welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Nun Zayin, Daf 157 of Masechta Shabbis. Now friends, it's an exciting day over here today at Babel on Talmud because today we complete Masechta Shabbis. Exciting stuff, everyone. Great job. So we're going to start off today talking a little bit about Muktza. Then we move on to the final Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos. It talks about things like aras nedarim, aras nedarim, exciting stuff like that. And then Masechta Shabbos goes out in an interesting kind of way. Some interesting tumas ohel. They couldn't just give us some light fun stuff at the end. But then at the very end we have this kind of esoteric story, which is I guess a little bit comical. So we can check that out. Anyways, friends, let's get started. We're going to begin on Daf Kuf Nun Vav Amud Beis. We got a little bit of stuff to do here, but it's not so complicated. About 15 lines from the bottom at the new Mishnah. So, Mechatchin es adluin lifnei abehema v'sanevel lifnei aklavim. So we can take gourds and we can cut them up into little pieces for animals. If the animals are hungry, you can take some gourds. Now, you're not allowed to harvest the gourds, but the gourds were already harvested. You can cut them up for the animals. And you can take a nevela. Let's say there was a sheep that died on Shabbos, so you can cut up the sheep for the dogs on Shabbos as well. Now, the chiddush here is that these things are muktza, right? Initially the gourds the assumption was that human beings were going to eat these gourds. And this nevela, I guess you assume that you were going to eat the sheep, but then it died, and now the dog is going to eat the sheep. So even though these things are muktza, or depends on if you hold of muktza or not, so clearly we're saying that it's acceptable, so this must not be Rabbi Yehuda. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im lo haisa nevelim erev Shabbos asura lefi she'ena min hamuchan. Says Rabbi Yehuda, look, if this nevela was not already nevela when Shabbos started, i.e., it died on Shabbos, which means that when Shabbos started, you assume that you were going to be the one to eat this animal, so then it would be considered muktza, and you would be unable to feed it to your animal. Okay. Now, we're going to have we're going to list 6 different Amoraim, and we're going to say who holds like Rabbi Yehuda, and who holds like Reb Shimon when it comes to Muktza, or the lack thereof. Itmar, it was stated, Amr Ula Alacha Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so Ula subscribes to Rabbi Yehuda's view of Muktza. Ve'af Rav Savar Alacha Rabbi Yehuda, Rav also is in the Rabbi Yehuda camp. And how do we know this? From the mats of boats. I guess they would have on their boats, they would have merchandise. They would cover the merchandise with these mats. The Rav also Shmuel Shari, that Rav would say that you're not allowed to move these mats because they're muktzah. Shmuel says that you would be allowed to move the mats. They are not muktzah. Okay. Daf Levi Savar Alacha Rabbi Yehuda. Levi also holds that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Ki had the Levi kavu maisi trefasa lekami biyom atava lo hava chazila el kiyasiv akil kalisa the amr duma lo miskasha vafilu leklavim lo chazil. Let's read that again. So even Levi holds that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda in terms of muktza. Ki had the Levi kavu maisi trefasa lekami biyom atava. If the people would bring a treifa to Levi on Yom Tov to see, right, meaning you'd have people, they would shecht a sheep or something on Yom Tov and to eat it, and then they weren't sure maybe it was treif or not, so they would bring it to Levi to check out and see to determine if the animal was a treifa and if they can eat it. So lo hava chazila el kiyasav akil kalisa. He would only inspect the animal if it was already kind of sitting in the garbage, because the Amar Dilma lo miskasha vafilu leklavim lo chazil, because it says, because if this animal ends up being not kosher, well then it will be completely muktzah. You won't even be able to feed it to the dogs, and therefore, you want to avoid any questions of Muktza, he would only even take a look at the animal to determine if it was a treifa or not. If the animal was already in a place that if it turns out that it was a treifa, you can just leave it there. Okay? Because he was concerned about Muktza like Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel Amar, halacha Reb Shimon. Now Shmuel says the halacha is like Reb Shimon. Vav Zeiri sav halacha Reb Shimon. Zeiri also holds that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. That we have a Mishnah in Beitza that says that if you have an animal that dies, i.e. it's an Avela, lo yazizenim imkoma, don't move it. V'tirgma Zeiri, and Zeiri says, you know what this Mishnah is talking about? Bivemas kadshim, ava b'chulin shaper dami. That Mishnah that says that if you have an animal that dies, you can't move it because it's Muktza, that's only if it's kadshim. So only if it's an animal. I guess maybe you took a sheep, you said, hey, Mr. Sheep, you're going to be a korban, you're going to be a korban shlamim, I guess, let's say. And the sheep is really excited that he's going to have the zchus to be a korban shlamim. But then it dies. So in that case, because it was kadshim, so you can't feed it to the dogs. However, if it was just regular chulin, if you just have a sheep and one of your sheep dies, well then you would be allowed to move it and feed it to the dogs. So we see that he holds like Reb Shimon. But Reb Yochanan amar halacha Reb Shimon. Reb Yochanan also says that halacha is like Reb Shimon. But wait a second. Would Reb Yochanan really say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon? Of course, as we've seen a million times, Rabbi Yochanan holds that the halacha is like a stam mishnah, that if you have a mishnah that is not attributed to any one teacher, to any particular teacher, so then that means that the halacha is like that mishnah. And we're going to show that there's a stam mishnah that says, that seems to be holding of Muktza, which means that according to Rabbi Yochanan's rule, he should have to hold like that mishnah and say like Rabbi Yehuda that there is Muktza. Utanan, we learn in a mishnah, also in Beitza, in mevakin eitzim min akoris v'lo min akora shenishbra b'yamtiv, that if you have a pile of wood that is going to be used for building a house, let's say, so it's not for firewood, so it's Muktza. Ein mevakin eitzim min akoris, you wouldn't be able to use that wood for a fire to cook with, i.e. to chop that wood up into pieces that you would put into a fire, because that wood is Muktza. Or if you have like an older beam from the house, and the beam breaks, what are you going to do with this beam? It's for burning. But it only broke on Shabbos, on Yom Tov itself. So he says you wouldn't be allowed to use it because it wasn't muchan when Yom Tov started. So we see that we have a Stam Mishnah that is concerned about Muktza. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Masnila. Rabbi Yochanan says, yeah, but that Mishnah is not a Stam Mishnah. It's a particular opinion. Whose opinion is it? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yochanan says that the halacha isn't like that particular Mishnah. Fine. Tashma coming here. Maschilim baremas hateven. That again, when it comes to burning, fuel for your fire on Yom Tov, so it says that you're allowed to use a pile of straw. And Rashi points out we're talking about straw that was like rancid and not for feeding animals, but just for burning. Avalo be'etzim sheba muktzah. However, now Muktza over here doesn't mean Muktza. Muktza, well, we're going to argue that it is Muktza, but what the Muktza is over here, says Rashi, is basically they would have, behind their house, they would have an area where they would just store random stuff. That was called the Muktza, the place that you would put things aside for later. So, in this case, so you're allowed to use straw that is set aside for burning, that straw that is for burning. However, if you have wood that is in this area behind your house, that we're assuming right now you had set aside for later, for whatever reason, whether it's for firewood for the winter, whatever it is, you cannot use that on Yom Tov for your cooking because you had set it aside for a different time. So new. So we see in this brisa that we have this, or I guess it's a Mishnah, this Stam Mishnah, that seems to be saying that Muktza is a thing, right? You can't burn this wood on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, because it was in this kind of shed area that was put aside for longer term, not for use today. So the Gemara answers, Hasan ba'arze v'ashuche. Yeah, but there it's talking about cedar and what was Ashuche? Arze and Ashuche are just different types of cedar, right? Male cedar and female cedar. But the point is that it wasn't burning wood. It was more expensive wood that you were going to use for building. And because it was more expensive wood, the Muktza machmas chesron kis afilu Reb Shimon moda. Even Reb Shimon admits when it comes to Muktza machmas chesron kis, right? If something is very expensive, so Reb Shimon assumes that that's off limits. And even Reb Shimon would agree that that's Muktza. So, meaning, whereas, so Reb Yochanan would hold like Reb Shimon. But what about the Stam Mishnah that sounds like, that this wood that was behind your house, you're not allowed to use for burning? That's because it was expensive wood. That's Muktza machmas chesron kis. Reb Shimon also agrees that Muktza machmas chesron kis you wouldn't be able to move. Tashma, come in here. In mashkim v'shochten es hamidbarius, of a mashkim v'shochten es habaisos. So we have another, I guess, Mishnah that says that you're not allowed to give water to and then shecht animals that are not domesticated, that are kind of just out in the wild. Of a mashkim v'shochten es habaisos. So if you have, domesticated sheep, let's say, and you want to shecht a sheep on Yom Tov, so gesundte, hey, enjoy. However, if these sheep were kind of wild sheep from outside of the town, and somehow you get your hands on it, you wouldn't be able to shecht it because it's Muktza. So again, how could Rabbi Yochanan hold like Rabbi Shimon if we have a Mishnah that seems to be holding like Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yochanan stam achrina ashkach. So the Gemara answers, yeah, but Rabbi Yochanan is going based on a different Stam Mishnah that holds like Rabbi Shimon, which is that. So Beis Shammai omrim magbiin me'al hashulchan atzamos uklifin. Beis Shammai says that you would be allowed to pick up off the table bones and shells. These are things that are Muktza. What are you going to do with bones and shells? Whereas Beis Hillel says you pick up the entire table and then shake off the table, but do not pick up the bones and shells themselves because they're Muktza. From Rav Nachman, anu ein lanu ela Beis Shammai k'Rab Yehuda u'Beis Hillel k'Rab Shimon, and Rav Nachman says, yeah, but it's true. This Mishnah does seem to be does say explicitly that Beis Shammai doesn't hold of Muktza and Beis Hillel does hold of Muktza. However, Rav Nachman says the fact of the matter is that we assume that it's Beis Shammai who holds like Rabbi Yehuda that there is Muktza, and Beis Hillel holds like Reb Shimon that there is no Muktza. And you might be wondering, wait, but how is that a Stam Mishnah? It's clearly attributed to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Rashi points out Beis Hillel chashiv kistama, that whenever there's the opinion of Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai, it's so obvious that we go, it's so clear that we go like Beis Hillel that it's like a Stam Mishnah. And this Lemaisa, I think, is something that we're going to get to in Masechta Eruvin in 2 weeks. I think it's on Masechta Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, that Bas Kol that came out of heaven and said that the halacha is always like Beis Hillel, I believe. Okay, very good. So Rabbi Yochanan also holds like Reb Shimon. Okay, very nice. Pligi bar Rav Acha v'Ravina. There's machlokes between Rav Acha and Ravina. Chad Amar b'chol haShabbos kula halacha k'Reb Shimon. So one of them says that when it comes to all of Hilchos Shabbos, halacha is like Reb Shimon. That melacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa is pater. That davar she'ein miskaven is mutter. Levar mi muktzah machmas meus. The only exception being muktzah machmas meus. When it comes to muktzah machmas meus, when something's muktzah because it's disgusting, so I guess Reb Shimon would say that you're allowed to move it. However, says whether it's Rav Acha or Ravina, he says that we don't hold like Reb Shimon regarding that. And muktzah machmas meus, you would not be allowed to move. Umay knew, what's an example of something that's muktzah machmas meus? Ner yoshan, a used candle. A used candle is muktzah machmas meus. And the other one, whether it's Rav Acha or Ravina, says that no, when it comes to muktzah machmas meus, the halacha is also like Reb Shimon that you'd be allowed to move it. Levayim muktzah machmas iser. No, the nafkamina is by muktzah machmas iser. When something is muktzah because it's usher, we're going to see what that is in a second. Reb Shimon says you'd be allowed to move it. However, we say that you wouldn't be allowed to move it. Umay niu ner shadliku ba ba'osa Shabbos, and that is a candle that was lit on that Shabbos. That would be Muktza machmas iser, and Reb Shimon would say you're allowed to move it, but we don't move it. However, when it comes to Muktza machmas chesun kis, when something is Muktza because it's so expensive, such as the cedar wood that we were talking about a few minutes ago, and also we're going to give another example now, Reb Shimon would also admit that it's Muktza. The Tanan, as we learn in the Mishnah, Kol HaKelim Nitalim b'Shabbos, you're allowed to move, you're allowed to take any kli on Shabbos chutz, v'meser agadol v'yoset shamach resh. The exceptions being Meser Agadol, a big professional saw that whoever owns it will be very makbid to make sure that nobody else uses it so that it doesn't, so that it doesn't get damaged. Or if you have the coulter of the plow, remember the coulter of the plow? So if you have the coulter of the plow, so then it's like that knife thing in the plow. So that's also something that is a professional implement, and you're going to want to make sure that it doesn't get damaged in any way. So that is Muktza machmas chesun kis, that it's Muktza because it's very expensive and you want to take care of it. So even Reb Shimon would admit that that would be Muktza. Okay. New Mishnah, final Mishnah. Mefir nedarim b'Shabbos v'nishalin nedarim she'ein letzorich haShabbos. So hafaras nedarim is that if a wife makes some kind of neder and she says whatever, she's not going to eat meat anymore, and the husband says, you're not going to eat meat? What do you mean? And then he annuls the vow. Okay, fine. So mefir nedarim b'Shabbos. So you're allowed to be meifir nedarim on Shabbos. A husband can annul the vows of his wife on Shabbos. Now, what if the husband said that he's not going to eat meat? So then, so we say that he would be allowed to go to a chacham to do aras nedarim, to allow the neder that he made, as long as it's a tzorich Shabbos, as long as it's for a need of Shabbos. So I don't know if necessarily not eating meat would fill that bill, but let's say he says, I'm not going to eat anything. He says he's not going to eat any food. Now on Shabbos, of course, you have to eat food. You have to have a suda, right? So let's say he says he's not going to eat. So therefore he can't have a suda, but he needs to have a suda. It's Shabbos, so he can go to the rabbi in order to do ataras nedarim, or even just get 3 shmendriks and do ataras nedarim. You can do that as well. Okay, and we're going to figure out in the Gemara, does it have to be necessarily connected to Shabbos? Does it not have to be connected to Shabbos? Is it only for him? What about for her? Okay, we're going to get to that in a few minutes. Ma'or is a window. So if you have a window, you'd be allowed to plug it up. Remember that machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer? Can you put the shutter in the window on Shabbos? So apparently the Mishnah says that you'd be allowed to close a window, to kind of put something in a window. Umodidin as a matlis, you can measure a fabric to see if it's 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths to see if it's tameh. Okay. Umodidin as a mikveh. Okay, you can measure a mikveh to see if it's big enough. Very nice. Umaisib b'mei aviv shel Reb Tzadok uv'mei Abba Shaul ben Botnis, and there was a story during the days of the father of Reb Tzadok and during the days of Abba Shaul ben Botnis. Okay, what was the story? Shepakuku as a ma'or b'tafiach. Okay, that in this story, they closed a window with some kind of a vessel. So let's say there was a little window, and then they took some kind of a vessel, and they put it in the window to close it. Okay? V'kashra mikeda bigemi, and they also tied another kind of small pitcher that is the size of a tefach, and they tied that with a string, some kind of a reed to serve as a string, leidem yesh begigis poseach tefach imlav, to see if in the vat there is a hole the size of a tefach. We're going to get there at the end. It's this really exciting story about somebody who's dying in between 2 houses that are close to each other, and there's a barrel above him, and everyone's ignoring him and instead measuring the barrel to see if the house is going to be tameh from the window that has a kli in it. So exciting stuff. So midivreim lamanu shepokin umodim v'koshim b'Shabbos. And we learned from Abba Shaul ben Botnis and the father of Reb Tzadok that you would be allowed to stuff up a window, and you can also measure and tie on Shabbos, and we'll get there in a few minutes. Ibayluhu. So the Gemara wants to know, Hafara bein letzarech uven shelo letzarech u'she'ela letzarech in shelo letzarech lo. So they want to know, because if we take another look at the Mishnah, what does the Mishnah say? Mefir nedarim b'Shabbos. Okay, so you can do afaras nedarim on Shabbos. Full stop. There's no distinctions. If a wife makes a neder, whatever it might be, she's not going to eat meat anymore, or whatever it is, so her husband can be made for the neder, no matter what it is. But when it says, if the husband makes a neder, that whatever it might be, so we say, well, if it's necessary for Shabbos, i.e., he says, I'm not going to eat anymore. Well, what are you going to do about Suda Shabbos? Well, then he can go and do ataras nedarim. But if he says, he says, I'm not going to step into a certain supermarket anymore, well, he's not going to the supermarket today anyways, so just wait till after Shabbos. Right? So do we say that, okay, so it seems clear that when it comes to the neder, the nedarim of the husband, and we're talking about doing ataras nedarim for him, so it seems clear that we would only do that on Shabbos if it's specifically related to Shabbos. But we don't seem to see such a distinction when it comes to the afaras nedarim of the wife. So the question is, does such a distinction exist or not? So the Gemara wants to know, Ibayalu, hafara, when it comes to the afaras nedarim of the wife, bein letzarech uven shelo letzarech, is that whether or not it's connected to Shabbos? U'she'ela letzarech in shelo letzarech lo. But when it comes to the ataras nedarim of the husband, it would only be if it was connected to Shabbos. But if it's not connected to Shabbos, just let him do it after Shabbos. Oh, and there's an important point that I didn't mention. Hafaras nedarim, when a husband annuls the vows of his wife, he has only a 1-day period to do it. And we're going to see in a few minutes that it's machlokas. Is this 1 day 24 hours, or is this 1 day only until the nighttime? We'll get there in a few minutes, but that's an important point. So the point being that, the husband, when he makes a neder, the next day or the day after that, whenever he wants, he can always do ataras nedarim. Okay? And therefore, are we saying that because he can always do ataras nedarim whenever he wants, he can only go and be matir nedarim that are specifically connected to Shabbos? So if he says, I'm not going to eat anymore, well, but he has to eat a Suda Shabbos, well, then he can go and be matir the neder on Shabbos. However, when he says that I'm not going to go to a certain supermarket anymore, so, he can always just be matir that whenever he wants. But the husband annulling the vows of his wife, well, he only has 1 day to do that. So, therefore, we want to know, are there any limitations to what kind of nedarim he can be meifir, given the urgency, let's say, of the situation. So Ibayla, they want to know, afara bein letzarech uven shelo letzarech. So we say that. So the question is, when the husband can be meifir the nedarim of the wife, is that no matter what kind of neder she made? U'she'ela letzarech in shelo letzarech lo. When it comes to a man being matir doing ataras nedarim, that is only when it's connected to Shabbos, because something else that's not connected to Shabbos, you can always just do another time. And that is why we make a distinction in the Mishnah between them. That it says, Mefir nedarim b'Shabbos, that when it comes to hafaras nedarim for the husband to do for the wife, that could be, on anything. And then it says, V'nishal nedarim she'en letzarech Shabbos. But when it comes to hataras nedarim for the husband, so to be matir his own nedarim, it's only when they're connected to Shabbos. O dilma hafar nami letzarech. Or maybe the husband annulling the vows of his wife is also only if it's connected to Shabbos. So if she says that she's not going to eat the Shabbos, she's not eating any more food, so then he could be made for that neder. Shelo letzarech lo. But if she says that she's not going to go to a certain supermarket anymore, well then he wouldn't be able to be made for that on Shabbos. palig lihu me'adadi. Well, then why do we make a distinction in the Mishnah between them if they're both really talking about the same thing? That they're allowed to be not matir and meifir respectively if it is the tzarech Shabbos. So mishum da'afara ein tzarech bezdin u'sheila tzricha bezdin. The reason why we make a distinction between the two is because hafaras nedarim doesn't require a bezdin. The husband can just be meifir the neder of his wife. But hataras nedarim does need a bezdin, even if it's a bezdin of nudniks, but it needs some kind of a bezdin. Or you can go to a yachid mumche, right, a chacham. Okay, fine. So that's what we want to know. Basically, it's clear that when it comes to hataras nedarim, it would have to be connected to Shabbos. The question is, by hafaras nedarim, does the subject matter of the neder have to be connected to Shabbos, or can it be anything? Tashma, come in here, the Tani Zuti, Dvei Rav Papa, that Zuti from the Besmedrash of Rav Papa taught, Mefir nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorech HaShabbos, that you would be allowed, that a husband can annul the vows of his wife on Shabbos only if the neder, the vow, is connected to Shabbos. L'tzorech HaShabbos in, shelo l'tzorech HaShabbos lo. So we see that hafaras nedarim can be done only when the neder of the wife is specifically connected to Shabbos, such as, I am not going to eat anymore. Well, you have to eat Sudas Shabbos, so he could be matir that neder, meifir that neder. Lishna achrina, another kind of discussion, sort of, Bobo, Asiri, Mamish just said it. You couldn't get more Bobo than that. So Lishna achrina, sort of another approach to this same question. Ibailu, they wanted to know. L'tzorech atarvayu katane. So when it says that the neder would have to be connected to Shabbos, is that both talking about the neder of the wife as well as the neder of the husband? V'shelo l'tzorech lo. But if it wasn't connected to Shabbos, there would not be able to be a hafaras nedarim or a hataras nedarim. Alma hafaras nedarim me'es leis. Okay, so here we go. Which implies that hafaras nedarim you have 24 hours for, right? Meaning, if we're saying, we have two different types of neders that the wife made. One of them is that she's not going to eat anymore, which has implications for Shabbos. And the other one is, I'm not going to go to the supermarket, a certain supermarket anymore, which, will have implications for, the weekdays, but not for Shabbos. So if we say that he is not allowed to do anything about the supermarket neder, well, but he's only got one day to be meifir this neder. And if he's not meifir this neder, well, he lost his chance to be meifir. Can she do hataras nedarim on it? I don't know. But hafaras nedarim, the husband being able to nullify the vows of his wife, he's only got one day. So now if we say that he's only allowed to be meifir on Shabbos, vows that are connected to Shabbos, but what about vows that aren't connected to Shabbos? If she does those vows on Shabbos, then hafaras nedarim is irrelevant? So the answer is no. Hafaras nedarim is still relevant. But the thing is, when we say that he's got one day to do it, it means 24 hours. And therefore, if it's 2 p.m. on Shabbos, and she says, I'm not going to go to a certain supermarket anymore, well then, he's still got until 2 p.m. on Sunday. So because it's not connected to Shabbos, so there's no reason why he should be made for it on Shabbos. Just wait till Motzai Shabbos and be made for it then. Okay? But if she says, I'm not going to eat anymore, but she's got to eat Sudas Shabbos, so then he could be made for it on Shabbos. Okay, fine. O Dilma, or perhaps, Ki katani l'tzorech ashe'ela hu de katani. Or maybe when it says that the neder specifically has to be connected to Shabbos, that is only when it comes to hataras nedarim of the husband. So if meaning he says that he's not going to eat anymore, so he has to eat Sudas Shabbos, so you could do hataras nedarim. But if he says that he's not going to go to a certain supermarket anymore, so then he's not allowed to go to do hataras nedarim on Shabbos because he could do it another time. Aval hafaras nedarim afilu shelo l'tzorech. But when it comes to hafaras nedarim, the husband nullifying the vows of the wife, he could do that even if it has nothing to do with Shabbos. If she says that she's not stepping into a certain supermarket anymore, well then he could be meifir that neder even on Shabbos. How come? Well, because if not, then he's going to lose his chance. Al hafaras nedarim kol hayom. which means that hafaras nedarim, the husband only has until nightfall. Until nightfall. Meaning if she, at 2 in the afternoon, says that she's not going to a certain supermarket anymore, well, if he wants to nullify that, he's gotta really do it right now, because once it becomes nightfall, and it's already considered a new day, he's not going to be able to be made for the neder anymore. So therefore we allow him to be made for the neder on Shabbos, even, no matter what the subject matter is. So basically, we want to know, is hafaras nedarim for 24 hours or only until nightfall? And that would have implications for what kinds of nedarim the husband could be made for. If hafaras nedarim, he has 24 hours from the time that he hears it, then that means that we would limit hafaras nedarim on Shabbos only to things that are needed for Shabbos. But if it's not strictly needed for Shabbos, let him do it after Shabbos, because he has 24 hours. And if we say that hafaras nedarim is only until nightfall, well then the husband would be able to be made for any nedarim, because if he doesn't do it now on Shabbos, well, comes nighttime, he can't do it anymore. And therefore, even if she says that, she's not going to go to a certain supermarket anymore, well then he can be made for that on Shabbos as well. That's the question. Tashma the Tani Rav Zuti by Rav Papi. Come here, the Rav Zuti by the Rav Papi, that Rav Zuti from the Besmedrash of Rav Papi. I guess Rav Papi is the same thing as Rav Papa, I guess. He taught Mefir Nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorech haShabbos. So he says the same thing he said a few minutes ago, which is that a husband can annul the vow of his wife on Shabbos as long as it is related to Shabbos. L'tzorech haShabbos in, shelo l'tzorech haShabbos lo, which means that he's only allowed to annul vows that are connected to Shabbos, but regarding, let's say, the supermarket vow, he would not be able to annul it. Alma hafaras nedarim me'es le'es. So we see, if he's not going to annul it on Shabbos, then when can he annul it? The answer is after Shabbos, because he has 24 hours to annul a vow, not just until nightfall. Amar Rav Ashi, v'anan tanan hafaras nedarim kol hayom. But 1 second, says Rav Ashi, but we have a Mishnah, and that Mishnah says that hafaras nedarim is only until nightfall. So how could we be saying right now from this Zuti from the Besmedrash of Rav Papa, how can he make the claim that you have 24 hours to do hafaras nedarim, and we have a Mishnah that says that you only have until nightfall to do hafaras nedarim? Sometimes you can have a lot of time to do the hafaras nedarim. Sometimes you can have a little time. Ketzad, how? Nadra leile Shabbos, mefer leile Shabbos v'yom Shabbos ad shetechshach. Right? If she makes her neder on Friday night, so they're sitting down at the Friday night meal, and she makes an announcement, I'm not eating meat anymore. And he says, what do you mean you're not eating meat? Who says that you're not eating meat? So in that case, he could be made for the neder right then and there. And if not right then and there, he could do it tomorrow morning. Until the end of Shabbos, he could be made for that neder. Nadra im chashecha mefer ad shetechshach. Now, if she makes this neder, right before Shabbos is over, right? The same discussion happens not at the Friday night Suda, but at Shalosh Shudis, while they're singing Mizmor LeDavid, she interrupts them and says, I'm not eating meat anymore. So then he really better chap arayin and be made for that neder if he wants to, because comes nightfall, he's going to miss his chance. Because if he didn't be made for that neder by the time it becomes nightfall, well then he lost his chance. No. So on the one hand, we were saying that he has 24 hours to be made for the nedarim of his wife, but on the other hand, we seem to have a Mishnah that says that he only has until nightfall. Tanai, so the Gemara says, well, it's a machlokas Tanaim. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, hafaras nedarim kol hayom, that hafaras nedarim is until nightfall. Rabbi Yossi, Bar Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Amru me'es le'es, whereas Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say hafaras nedarim is for 24 hours. Alright, very nice. Okay, so when it comes to hafaras nedarim, it's machlokas. Do you have only till nightfall, or do you have 24 hours? Very, very, very exciting stuff. V'nishalim l'nedarim. And then, so we said that when it comes to ataras nedarim, so if the husband makes a neder that, he's not going to eat any food, and therefore, if he's not going to eat food, well then, how's he going to have Sudas Shabbos? Sudas Shabbos involves eating food. So Ibayla they asked Akasha, B'shelo hayelo pnai, odum afilu hayelo pnai. So when we say that when the husband makes the neder, that he's not going to eat any more food, so on Shabbos he's allowed to go and do ataras nedarim. So the Gemara wants to know, is he only allowed to do that if he didn't have time before Shabbos to do that ataras nedarim? First of all, what is ataras nedarim? We do it on Erev Rosh Hashanah. There's a minute to do ataras nedarim, right? You basically read this text in front of this ad hoc bezdin of 3 nudniks, and you basically say, I made a whole bunch of vows, and then they say 3 times, it's okay, whatever. It's a whole text. But that's ataras nedarim. It undoes these neders that you did. So we want to know, when you're allowed to do ataras nedarim, is that only if you didn't have a time before Shabbos to do ataras nedarim? Okay? Or maybe even if he did have time to do ataras nedarim before Shabbos, but he didn't, he would still be allowed to do ataras nedarim on Shabbos because he has to eat his Sudas Shabbos. Tashma Kavnir is the Kikule Rabbanan, the Rav Zutra, the Rav Zera, that the rabbis, well, let's go weiter for a second. Visharule Nidre Vafagav Davule Penai, that the rabbis did ataras nedarim for Rav Zutra bar Bre, the Rav Zera, that they did ataras nedarim for him even though he had time before Shabbos, that he could have done ataras nedarim, but he didn't, and they still did ataras nedarim for him anyways. So I guess we see that even if you had time to do ataras nedarim before Shabbos, but you didn't, you could still do it on Shabbos, I guess, as long as it's connected to Shabbos. Okay. Shepakaku es amayr b'tafiach v'kasharu es amekeda begemi. Okay, so the Mishnah continued and said that there was a story with Abba Shaul ben Botnis and the father of Reb Tzaddik, that they closed up a window and they also tied some kind of a jug or something that was the size of a tefach to see if some barrel was the size of a tefach. What in the world are we talking about? Well, let's at least try to figure it out. But it's cool. We got this. It's under control. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Hilkite Kitana Haisa ben Shnei Batim. Okay, so Yehuda Amar Rav sort of explains the situation for us. It was a story, and in the story there were 2 houses, and in between the 2 houses there was like a very thin little path. Okay, so the houses are very close to each other, and in between the houses is a thin path. Okay, Vituma Isa Sham. Okay, and on this little path there was a fellow who was dying. He was dying, Lamaisa. Still alive now, but won't be alive for much longer. Vigigis Srukam Munachas Al Gabon. Okay, and now resting on the 2 houses above this fellow was a barrel. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing, friends. Here's the thing. So this fellow is dying on this path. On either side of him are houses. Above him directly is a barrel. The barrel is resting on the 2 houses. That barrel now is going to make an ohel. And therefore, when this fellow dies, so you're going to have a mace that is in an ohel because there's this covering above him. Now here's the thing as well. In one of the houses, on the side of the house, on the wall, there was a window. And therefore, since above this mace was a barrel, so the mace is considered in an ohel a mace, and therefore this window, if it's open, the tumah will go from this ohel that the mace is in right now, travel in and spread into the house. So they're trying to figure out, like, when this fellow dies, are the contents of this house that has the open window, is everything in the house going to become tameh from tumas ha'ohel? So this is what they did. You ready? Oh, and there's one more detail, friends. This barrel had a crack in it. Now, if the crack is 1 tefach wide, well then it's not going to make an ohel. The tumah is just going to go right through the barrel, and it's not going to be in an ohel. If the crack is less than a tefach wide, well then it's going to still be considered an ohel, and then we have to be concerned about everything in the house becoming tameh. So this is what they did. Ufakaku es ha'ma'or b'tafiach. So the first thing that they did was they took a vessel and they put it in the window to basically close the window, to stuff up the window, so that even in the event that the crack would not be big enough, still the tumah wouldn't, get into the house because the window is closed. So that's the first thing that they did. V'kashru es amikeda begemi leda im yesham begigis poteach tefach ulo olav. And then what they did was they took some kind of a reed and they tied it around some kind of little kli that was the size of a tefach, and they wanted to now dangle this kli into the barrel to see if it fits through the hole. And if it fits through the hole, then clearly the hole is a tefach large. If it doesn't fit into the hole, well then clearly the hole is not a tefach large. And so if it is a tefach large, well then the tumah will just go straight through the barrel all the way up to the sky, and there won't be an ohel, and there will be nothing to be concerned about in terms of the contents of the house becoming tameh. If the hole in the barrel is less than a tefach, well then it's going to be considered a good covering, and it will be an ohel, and we will have to be concerned about the things in the house with the open window becoming tameh. And but I mean, it would sound like since they put the kli in the window to stuff it up, then it wouldn't go through anyways. So that is what they were trying to figure out over there. Okay, and continues the Gemara quoting the Mishnah with Devarim Lamadnu. So what do we learn from them? Shepokakin, that we'd be allowed to take this kli and stuff up the window. Okay, Umodidin, and that you're allowed to measure, as they were using this kli to measure this barrel. V'koshrin, and they also tied this reed around the kli that's a tefach wide to see, so that they could dangle it into the barrel to see if it is, the hole is a tefach. So we say you can tie also, as long as it's not a kesher shakayama, b'Shabbis. Now here's this interesting story. Ula ikla leveresh gelusa. Ula visited the exilarch. Chazi l'Rabba bar Rav Huna, and Ula saw that Rabba bar Rav Huna, the Yosef be'abna demaya, he was sitting in some kind of vat of water. Sounds almost like a bath of sorts. And he was measuring the bath. Interesting incident, right? Ula goes to the Reish Gelusa on Shabbos, and he sees that Rabba bar Rav Huna is sitting in a bath and measuring it. Amrle. So Ula says to Rabba bar Rav Huna, Emar da Amir Rabbanon medida de mitzvah, tilab mitzvah mi amor. So Ula says, wait, no, Rabba bar Rav Huna, I'll say that when the Rabbanan say that you're allowed to measure something on Shabbos, that's if it's, related to a mitzvah, such as, I guess, if it's an Ohel HaMeis or something like that. But just for fun, well, not just for fun, but, but just to measure for whatever other reason, who says that you would be allowed to measure things on Shabbos? To which he says, no, I'm not measuring for any need. I'm just doing it just for fun. I'm bored, and I'm just measuring the bath. So therefore it's allowed. It's an interesting story, right? Why is Rabba bar Rav Huna, I don't know, why was he bored? I don't know. It just feels like such a random thing for this great Amora, Rabba bar Rav Huna, to say, oh, I'm bored. I'm just killing time by measuring this bath. Seems like such a interesting activity for an Amora to be doing, to be just, oh, I'm just having fun by measuring stuff. I don't know. I figured it'd be learning or something. I don't know. Maybe it was different because he was in the bath. Well, we'll come back to you, Perek Misha, and that's all for now. Masechta Shabbos. Friends, I will see you tomorrow bright and early. Bring your game faces on for Masechta Eruvin. Am I supposed to say something now? Maybe. Well, friends, it's been fun. Masechta Shabbos was quite a trip. It's interesting to think about, we have this daily practice of Daf Yomi that we do it every day no matter what's going on. And it's interesting to see what's been going on during Masechta Shabbos. I mean, I think that when we started Masechta Shabbos, I think we didn't really know much about this coronavirus. And I feel like in my mind, that's been and I think what was going on during Masechta Shabbos, stuck here in my friend Jeff Handel's sublet, during this coronavirus, crazy stuff. Pesach happened, Shavuos, Tisha B'Av, this was all Masechta Shabbos and all this crazy stuff. So it's been an interesting few months, friends. Thanks for the opportunity for us to do it together. I'm loving it. I hope you guys are loving it. And I hope that we can continue and just get stronger and stronger. Nonetheless, friends, we have a daf of Gemara to review. Okay, so the daf Kuf Nun Zayin started off talking about like Muktza kind of stuff, the classic machlokas that we already are familiar with, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda holds of Muktza, Rabbi Shimon doesn't. Although we did say that when it comes to Muktza machmas ches and kiss, he will hold of Muktza. We talked about hataras and afaras nedarim. We said when it comes to hataras nedarim, well, you can do, if this guy makes a neder, he can do hataras nedarim anytime. And therefore, if he wants to do it on Shabbos, well, then he would only be allowed to do hataras nedarim on Shabbos if it's something related to Shabbos, such as that he's not going to eat anymore, which affects his ability to eat Sudas Shabbos. But if it's something not related to Shabbos, let him just do it any other time. When it comes to afaras nedarim, a husband annulling the vows of a wife, well, then he only has one day to do that. And therefore, so there's a machlokes between the Tanakama on the one hand, and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon on the other hand, that the Tanakama says that you only have until the evening, and therefore that the husband can only be made for the nedarim until the evening. The implications being that therefore he could be made for any kinds of subject matter for these nedarim, since if he doesn't do it by the end of Shabbos, he's going to miss the opportunity. Whereas Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon say that he has 24 hours to be made for nedarim, and therefore the implication is that on Shabbos itself, he should only be made for nedarim related to Shabbos itself. Anything related to other things, then he can just do it after Shabbos because he has 24 hours. We then talked about that interesting story with the Ohel HaMeis, which is pretty technical, and we ended up with that interesting anecdote with Ula and Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, where he was sitting in the bath at the Reish Galusa measuring for fun. So, and that is what Masechta Shabbos sends us off with. Friends, have a great day. Enjoy the festivities. Remember Abaye says, remember to celebrate. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Game faces.